The village of Hoffman Estates began in 1954 when Sam and Jack Hoffman, owners of the F&S Construction Company, bought the 160-acre Schrage Farm. This property was subdivided and developed into what became known as Parcel A, a group of 260 homes, each on 1/2 acre. This first parcel was located just east of Roselle Road between Gulf Road and Higgins Road. The new development made some residents of the farming community nervous. They were afraid that the subdivision residents would incorporate first and gain control of the area. They tried to incorporate first to gain judicial control of Hoffman Estates and future development within or near their boundaries. This move to incorporate was voted down in April of 1955. The proposed boundaries were then redrawn to exclude a large number of people opposed to the idea. On December 12, 1955, the proposition was passed and the village of Schaumburg Center was formed with 65 people. It did not include the Hoffman subdivision, but since it was within 1 1/2 miles of the boundaries, Schaumburg Center had judicial control of the area. The first homeowners began moving into the new subdivision, called Hoffman Estates, on November 30th, 1955.
We looked for a house for about a year. Charlie and I are shoppers. And we looked and we looked and we looked. And we saw models in Rolling Meadows. We saw models in Carpentersville. We saw models everywhere you could buy a house for under $15,000. Charlie and I shopped a year. We found 2 models out on Higgins Road, and you got 2 different elevations, and we said, we'll take it. We told our good friend Harriet and Mac about it, and they said, sounds good to us. They came out the next day and bought the same house.
Well, we were on our way to look at a home further west, and we passed by the models and decided we liked this area. We'd just go in and check the models. We went in and bought.
He said, it's far, isn't it? And I agreed. And then the next week we came out again, and it got closer. By the 4th time, it was pretty close to Chicago. We had decided that it wasn't, you know, for a home of our own, it was close enough.
But the thing that got us was it was a 1/2 acre of land.
Boy, these 3 big bedrooms we thought, living room, dining room, kitchen, utility room, carport on a 1/2 acre lot for $14,900.
There were some disadvantages to living in a new development far away from Chicago. Since Hoffman Estates was the only subdivision in the area, it took a while for many of the basic necessities to be developed, like roads, for example.
We all moved in 1956, just about the same time. The streets were unpaved. Apricot Street was a complete mud lane.
When we first moved in, and if it started to rain, we had to move our cars up to Golf Road, or else we wouldn't be able to get out. You know, I remember I had a plumber in and to hook up the gas. I moved in on a Wednesday, and I found out there was no gas even going into the place. They had to come down and put in a gas line, and the truck came with the furniture, and I had to go and get a bulldozer to have the truck pushed in and pulled in to my driveway.
Did Hoffman's people furnish that?
Yeah, Hoffman's.
Yeah, they were good about it.
The car got stuck in the mud, the moving van got stuck in the mud, and we all ran out and pushed. All the neighbors, not just us.
I remember when they were going to put in the roads, the Cook County zoning restrictions were that a road had to sit as a gravel road for 1 year and settle before they would allow it to be blacktopped.
Also, the instant landscaping of today was unheard of. It took a long time to develop a good-looking yard.
When we moved in, we were all young, foolish, dumb, very dumb, naive, and we took everything for granted what the builders told us. And here we had a big mound of dirt between her house and my house, and it was up to the telephone wires. And all of a sudden, here come the big trucks, and they're taking all the dirt out. Beautiful black dirt. Yes, this was beautiful, beautiful dirt. And we ran out, and I asked them where they were going with all this dirt, because it was getting low. It was getting down to the nitty-gritty. And here they were putting it all in all the backyards of the Bluebonnet and off of Ash Road and off of Bluebonnet. Our house looks up the hill, and all these backyards were filled with all this dirt, and they left us nothing.
We had no trees, just little twigs. We wouldn't know what kind of tree it was anyway. It was green, we planted it.
Another thing that I remembered was putting the grass in those half acres that we had, and then 3 families, the McGees and the Paganis and us, and the Oltians got a big plank, and they put big nails in a big board and took a car and scratched all the 3 lots, and then we all threw seed on it, and that's original grass 32 years later.
Everybody had seed. You went out and bought, 10 cents worth of grass seed, and you threw it in and then watered. We had half acres, and you had to water a half an acre.
As we moved in, other people our age moved in with new babies and kids, and we all had to learn how to put sod in the yards together and how to negotiate with the builder to get certain things done, and we built some lifelong relationships.
Initially, fire protection was a problem for the residents of Hoffman Estates, as the nearest fire station was in Roselle. The resulting high fire insurance premiums and the uneasiness of the residents led to the establishment of a volunteer fire department.
Years ago, we had a volunteer fire department, and Bob was on it, and about half of Apricot Street, I think. Maddie was one of the original members. And then the women came along, as women do, and formed an auxiliary. And we would make coffee and sandwiches and donuts for anybody that had a fire. We would be out there running around doing these little things.
I was appointed trustee pro tem in order to form a fire district. Out of 2 others, our closest fire protection was Roselle, and we collected donations, $25 per house.
$25 a house.
To buy a fire truck. The fire truck was housed in the old Hammerstein Farm barn. As a result of this, for the first time, seceded from 2 other fire districts, Roselle and Palatine, and formed Hoffman Estates Fire Protection District. Operated as a separate entity until, I believe, mid-70s, when it was transferred to the village.
I remember the first fire department going up right there on Flagstaff. We lived right on Grand Canyon and Flagstaff.
The first medical center in Hoffman Estates was opened October 14, 1957, in a tri-level house on Aztec Road, now called Ash Road. It housed Dr. Ivan Vasquez, an internist, Dr. A.E. Waxler, a dentist, Dr. V.J. Bavetta, an optometrist, and Dr. C.A. Salea, a pediatrician.
But it was a great relief when they built the hospital at 1555 Barrington Road, because otherwise we'd have had to go to Northwest Community, and that's pretty far if you need to go to an emergency room.
To fill the needs for schools in the area, F&S Construction Company built several schools, including Twinbrook, Blackhawk, Fairview, and Hoffman schools, and donated them to School District 54. By 1958, 811 students were enrolled. High school students were bused to Palatine High School until 1964, when Conant High School was built in Hoffman Estates. Blackhawk School is now the Schaumburg Township offices.
Teachers, principals, everyone is involved and I can't tell you, I walk through the schools and I couldn't be more proud of what we have here in Hoffman Estates.
There's none like it in any surrounding area or in Illinois and perhaps across the Midwestern states. District 54 and District 211 are also world-renowned school districts.
Hoffman Estates High School is an award-winning, nationally recognized blue ribbon high school. People value their education, and that's what makes a community great.
As Hoffman Estates grew, some residents began to want a local government. Schaumburg was approached but declined to annex them. Incorporation of Hoffman Estates was approved on September 19, 1959 by a vote of 759 to 569. On November 7th, the first village president, 6 trustees, a clerk, and a magistrate of police were elected and began functioning officially on November 12th with a budget of $6,206, which was donated by F&S Construction Company. Hoffman Estates was then less than 8,000 residents, and the incorporated area was under 3 square miles. The next month, the village took the deed to the Hammerstein farm buildings and land that became Chino Park, donated to the village by F&S Construction, who had been using the buildings as their offices. These buildings were used as the first village hall complex until 1972, when the new municipal building on Gannon Drive was opened. Beginning in 1961, 2,000 acres north of the tollway were annexed into Hoffman Estates. This area now includes Winston Knolls, Poplar Hills, Westbury, and the Paul Douglas Forest Preserve. This annexation more than doubled the incorporated land area.
But I helped to elect Virginia Hayter, Bruce Lynn, Darrell Rathman, Ralph Lyerla, and Fred Downey. Fred Downey was our candidate for mayor, and they completely swept the election.
And with the exception of some wonderful people, specifically the late Bruce Lynn and wonderful Virginia Hayter, who was mayor at the time, they pulled this community back up on its feet with honesty and integrity.
In 1965, 3,300 acres west of Barrington Road were annexed. Originally planned as Leisure World, an adult community, a majority of the land was purchased by the Cook County Board and became the Poplar Creek Forest Preserve after plans for Leisure World failed. Hoffman Estates grew steadily during the 60s and increased dramatically by the mid-70s. Between 1970 and 77, the number of households more than doubled from 5,337 to 11,860. The area had spread to over 18 square miles and 33,575 residents, according to the 1977 census. In the early years of Hoffman Estates, there were few social activities for residents to participate in. Out of this need, the Hoffman Estates Women's Club was formed in 1957. One branch of the group helped to establish the first library in Schaumburg Township. It was named after Arthur Hammerstein, a producer of musical comedies on Broadway and the uncle of songwriter Oscar Hammerstein. The farm, owned by Arthur and his wife Dorothy Dalton, a famous silent screen star, was one of the first purchased by F&S Construction. One farm building, the barn, was the first fire department. Later, it was the Boys Club. And the other was the village hall and police department. At first, the library books were housed in a grade school and later in a bungalow near the Roselle and Schaumburg Road intersection.
The library was a four-room house down on the corner of what? Roselle Road and
Schaumburg Road.
Schaumburg Road?
Yeah.
And it was just a four-room house. And one room was the office and had the coffee pot in it.
House, right?
And yeah, could have been.
Yeah, it was.
And then three rooms of books, and the books were all donated. I mean, every book you checked out said, you know, to Susie from Grandma or something like that.
And Adeline was hired to work at that point with the first librarian, Colleen Amundsen, who was still going to school. She didn't have her degree yet. And the periodicals department was in the bathroom.
In 1965, Schaumburg Township Public Library was built on Library Lane.
Some of our institutions, once again, were part of Schaumburg Township, and so that puts us in the position that we have a world-class library that is known all over the country.
Other early social activities included the Theater Guild, formed by a group of residents interested in performing. On December 5, 1958, their first production, The Tender Trap, was put on at the Blackhawk School. A babysitters co-op was also formed. Members not only sat for each other, but got together for coffee and conversation once a month at each other's homes.
Coffee clutches every day. We had a barbecue every week.
Right.
It was fun.
Something,
It was
right.
fun.
We formed our own mothers' clubs out here because none of our kids were old enough to babysit.
We never worried about leaving our children because we knew they were in good hands. And we were able to continue socially with our friends and relatives.
Well, we formed a bowling league. Women did a bowling
we bowled for several years.
And
Women's club.
Yeah. And in '59, we formed a golf club.
PTA. Oh my God, we started from scratch.
And if you staggered your kids, you were in forever. I was in for 17 years.
It was a great place to raise kids, and we all had good times. I enjoyed the babysitting club. Somebody must have talked about the babysitting club. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed PTA. We had Girl Scout troops and campfire
troops and for the boys.
Well, and when you had all those groups, they were all neighborhood kids.
Yeah, you
so
knew all
you knew
the kids,
and you knew the parents.
Yeah.
And there was actually a cul-de-sac down the street from us with 8 houses and 32 kids. And there wasn't a kid that was over the age of 12. And so it was very easy for your children to go out in the morning, find somebody to play with, and that's where they were. And you never worried about them because at that time it was still pretty much stay-at-home moms.
Back when I was growing up, the Village Hall was on Illinois Boulevard, and there were a bunch of old barns. The Boys Club was there. The 4th of July festivities were held at Chino Park there, and I remember playing baseball and being able to play at Chino, and then everyone going to the Dog and Suds, which was on Roselle Road, and just having a good time with our ice cream.
Little League started when I was 5 years old down at Twin Brook School, and that was before T-ball. Back then they had the coaches pitch underhand to the kids because none of the kids could throw the ball over the plate at that age.
In the early years of Hoffman Estates, the different religious groups met wherever they could find the space. On October 27, 1957, ground was broken for Prince of Peace Lutheran Church, the first church built in the village at the corner of Roselle Road and Illinois Boulevard. Roman Catholics met at the Buggy Whip Tavern, where several volunteers would arrive early Sunday mornings to clear tables and chairs from the dining room. To complete the conversion into a place of worship, a portable altar, lights, and chairs were set up for Mass.
That was our first church out here, and we would have our Masses on Sunday morning with the smell of beer.
After Mass, everything would have to be removed and restored for business as usual by 12:30 p.m. Anxious to find a new home, parishioners had a chapel built in 1958. This would be followed by St. Hubert's Church. The Episcopalians first gathered in 1959 at the Fairview School Gymnasium. That same year, Holy Innocents Episcopal Church began to take shape. The Presbyterians formed their church in early 1959 and met at Schaumburg Junior High. In 1960, the Church of the Cross was chartered and services were held in both English and Korean. Jewish high holiday services were held at the Homeowners Association Community Center called The Barn, while Sunday school and Friday services were at Twin Brook School. The Methodists first began meeting in a residence home.
It was November 1957. The first meeting was in our house to start the first church in Hoffman Estates, and it's called Our Savior's United Methodist Church. And we incorporated in March 1958.
In 1961, shortly after incorporation, there was a Jewel food store and a drugstore and a Ben Franklin store built on the east side of Roselle Road, facing Higgins Road. This came to be known as Hoffman Plaza, and in 1966, a post office was added. Where did residents shop for the 6 years before this?
And if you ran out of milk or bread, you could go up to the tavern on the corner. They would stock bread and milk for us, so we could walk up to the tavern and get our bread and milk. And our big shopping was Palatine or Roselle, which was 7 miles away. And if company came out, if they were low on gas, they just stayed overnight because there wasn't a gas station. We did not have a gas station. That's right.
The first industry started in Hoffman Estates in August of 1965 when Thomas Engineering began processing pharmaceuticals on Central Road. They also developed the process for sugar coating pills and candy, such as M&Ms. There is no mystery where the name Hoffman Estates came from. It was named for the father and son, Sam and Jack Hoffman, who built the first houses in 1955. According to Buzz Hoffman, Sam's grandson and vice president of the Hoffman Group, descendant of the old F&S Construction Company, builders at the time didn't spend much time or creativity thinking up names for new subdivisions. Developers frequently called new neighborhoods estates, heights, or meadows. The Hoffman part seemed logical. We thought we'd attach a little personal significance to it. There were several names on the ballot in March of 1958 when a name had to be selected for the community's incorporation the next year. Twin Brook was selected by popular vote, but overruled by association directors. To settle the controversy, another vote was taken on June 21st, in which all residents, registered to vote or not, were eligible to vote for the name of the village if incorporation was approved. The choices were Hoffman Estates, Twin Brook, or a write-in. The name Hoffman Estates was chosen in this special election.
The reason why we had to leave at Hoffman Estates
It was
was because of the Hoffman, Illinois, down in southern Illinois.
That was the difference.
There's a little town of 300.
Yeah.
And because of that town of 300 in southern Illinois, which was 300 years ago, and it's still 300. But even though we had more population, we couldn't use the name Hoffman, Illinois, so we had to keep the estates on there to use it.
Today, Hoffman Estates covers an estimated 18.3 square miles, 15,295 households, and 45,200 people. It is part of the Golden Corridor, the Northwest Suburban Expansion, and pathway of commercial and residential progress.
If you go to the late Mayor O'Malley, who was able to bring the Sears people in town, and continuing on with Mayor McLeod, this wonderful leadership in this community has taken this from a bedroom community to a really international community that it is today.
Bruce Lynn said, we have got to do something. We must think long term. That insurance building is open over there on Hassel. If we don't act now, we may never see a better opportunity for the taxpayers.
The village government consists of 305 full and part-time employees. Of those, the police department boasts 58 officers, 36 civilian support people, 9 sergeants, 4 lieutenants, 2 assistant chiefs, and 1 chief. The fire department includes 51 firefighters, 9 lieutenants, 3 captains, 1 assistant chief, and 1 chief. These personnel include 28 paramedics and 14 water recovery specialists, the largest in the northwest suburbs. There are 3 fire stations in Hoffman Estates. The price of housing has risen from around $15,000 in 1955 to between $65,000 and $400,000 for a single-family home. Townhomes and condominiums range from $40,000 to $200,000, and apartments from $450 to $750 a month.
We bought the top-of-the-line home from Hoffman Rosner, and it was $19,900.
The Hoffman Estates Park District, organized in 1964, covers over 347 acres at 46 different sites. This includes 8 buildings and a pool. Among them are Willow Creek Racquet Club and Blackhawk Community Center.
The Park District has come to a wonderful, wonderful institution.
The Hoffman Estates Park District, I get to brag a little here, is right now one of the 4 final this for the National Gold Medal Award, which represents the best park district for park districts 50,000 to 100,000 people.
We lived on Highland Pond, and I'll tell you, Rika, I used to spend every day at that pond, either fishing in the summer or running around the pond, or the park district had a lot of great activities.
The golf course, the playing fields. When I was first going on, we always were petitioning to get the playing fields. And the conditions, and there's so many better fields than when my kids grew up, and the next generation will probably even get better fields.
Poplar Creek Music Theater, the largest outdoor theater in the Chicago area with seating for 20,000, is adjacent to the Poplar Creek Forest Preserve.
Probably my fondest memory personally, however, was the availability of the Poplar Creek Music Theater to have the world-class entertainment within a couple of miles of my home, and being able to avail myself to a number of those.
Just brings back such awesome, awesome memories. The kids graduating from there, you know, the pomp and circumstance.
40% of the village is permanent open space and is comprised of parks, 3 golf courses, and forest preserves.
We have about 1/3 of our village in forest preserve, which is something you cannot buy anywhere as land.
Commerce has grown from a roadside tavern to 10 shopping centers and a 65-acre industrial park and several major office complexes. There is also Humana Hospital with 356 beds and an adjoining 65,000 square foot doctor's building. Adjacent to the hospital is Alden Poplar Creek, a 217-bed skilled and intermediate care nursing facility, and the Benchmark at Poplar Creek, a 253-unit retirement facility.
The village is still growing, and I think the point I would like to make is the joy I had in the actual growing, probably negotiating 20 annexation agreements and development agreements. When I came, most of the central core was developed, and The village has just won a case on the Winston Knowles subdivision where South Barrington, as always, I spent all 34 years litigating with them on some issue or the other. And this time it was whether you could annex over a tollway, and the court found that they could. I even used that with Papa Creek later to annex over the EJ&E Railroad.
Projects for two major corporations, Siemens Gamasonics and Ameritech, are scheduled for completion in 1989 and the early 1990s. Over the last 30 years, Hoffman Estates has grown from a bedroom community to a self-sufficient village with all the conveniences one expects these days. Gone are the days when residents had to go to other communities to fill the needs of everyday life.
I think the fact that we were able to get Ameritech to move in was a turning point as far as the economy of this community is concerned.
But I think the movement of the Sears Center, some of the large corporations that came into town really got this village on the right foot to being a great place to live.
This one small development project, it was with this company called Sears. And they were looking at the possibility of purchasing some land here in Hoffman Estates. And I remember I was going back and forth with a guy by the name of Doug Ellsworth, who was our finance director at the time. And the individual from Sears said, "Hey, I've got a document. We'd like to fax it to you. What's your fax number?" Not only did we not have a fax number, we didn't have a fax machine. So I said, "Let me call you back." And I ran down to Doug and I said, "Doug, what are we going to do?" And Doug grabbed some cash out of the petty cash, jumped in a car, and went to an office supply store here in Hoffman Estates, right over on Roselle Road, bought a fax machine, learned how to use it from the store clerk, realized we could plug it into any old line, got it back here. We plugged that thing in. We did a test run, called them back, told them the number. They faxed us the document. We got it. I don't think we ever saved the document as our first ever Hoffman Estates fax, but that's literally how it came down.
We suddenly saw 80 million of infrastructure, 2 exits on the tollway, the widening of 59 and 72, new large sewer interceptor down to Irving Park. Much happened, and it happened very quickly. Sears had an 800-acre development, and their home office was only 200 acres. Mr. Brennan said, "Well, you know, when we built the Sears Tower, we doubled the value of the South Loop, and we're not going to let that happen again." So Sears reaps the benefits of what they're able to develop on the balance of the 600 acres. That infrastructure, of course, allowed the building along Shoe Factory, which, although the village pushed for commercial, ended up mostly residential. And the land to the west of Beverly Road is still under consideration development. The first annexation agreement, I recall, we wrote in 1979, and we've extended and extended it, and someday we're going to grow to greatness out there as well.
We have the Sears Center, and we have professional hockey team. It practices at our park district. We have Cabela's. We have so many big corporations, big attractions. Northern Illinois University.
I think the greatest are the residents. We've had so many commissions, and they're all volunteer. They put many hours, myself included, 25 years on the 4th of July Festival, and nobody's paid, but yet they work so hard at all these commissions. And I don't think I've ever met a resident that I didn't really care for.
I feel we've developed so nicely and so gradually that you hardly notice the transformation from a little tiny village with 262 houses I think we had originally, up until what is today 50, 60,000 people, whatever it is, and all the industry and the development business-wise around here. It's just pleasant to see and pleasant to think back on.
As you look back, we've accomplished it, and we've accomplished it not only through all the things I just talked about, but also by providing it so it's economical to live here too, by mixing businesses and commercial and providing jobs, but yet providing great restaurants and shopping adventures. So it's a complete community, and let's face it, that's what greatness truly is having a great place to live in, having a fun place to live, and just having a great quality of life.
There became a reality in the community of Hoffman Estates that
if you wanted better services, if you wanted more services, that if you don't have a commercial base, if you don't have a business base, the only source of tax revenue then comes from the residents themselves. And I think as the community matured, I think the village board, the administration of the village board of the village decided that they had to go out and reach out and get more businesses, and that generated additional tax revenue. And as we can look at the Mayor O'Malley's forethought, and that board decided that they were going to do Prairie Stone Industrial Center, and most of our growth in the business arena has been out west. And so I think it's been good for the community to get that tax base, and we have a lot of them businesses in and around now, and I think it's a favorable business community.
When you look around, I think, and see what Hoffman Estates has become, I'd say growing to greatness has been a good start when they first selected that motto, and they have worked very hard. The government and the people that live here have worked very hard to make it what it is today.